It's a long road, and it's hard as hell. Tell me, what do you do to survive?
Josh here, and welcome to the fourth part of my Rambo-thon. This is my final entry in the Rambo-thon, as I cannot seem to get a hold of a copy of First Blood by David Morrell. So, in this video, I will focus on the third sequel in the Rambo series, simply titled Rambo, which marks the directorial debut of Sylvester Stallone in the Rambo series, as well as a return to quality filmmaking that foregrounds ideas rather than action, although there is plenty of that too. I did want to say, guys, though, if you've been holding back on watching my Rambo 3 review because of the time limit, I'd advise you to at least skim through it, because there is a lot of interesting things to talk about with that movie, even if you don't like the movie. Regardless, though, enjoy this review. I hope you enjoyed the Rambo-thon. Leave some comments down below. Say if you liked it or not. If not, that's fine. I won't do anything more like this. But I thought it was an interesting experiment, if nothing else. Without further ado, let's get on to the review. To start, I wanted to say that I think this newest sequel, Rambo, is a reactive movie in the best possible sense. And if you don't know what I mean by reactive movie, I speak of most remakes, and I realize this isn't a remake, but go with me here, whereas most remakes react to the cultural legacy of the character and strike the audience and critics more as cover bands of the original than anything else, because they have grown up with them. They like them, they realize the cultural legacy and what people want from them, whereas in the first place, the character is born out of a filmmaker's mind. All sequels after that, and any reboots in particular, are all born out of how people perceive that character and what they want from it. I think this newest sequel, Rambo, is much like that kind of reactive movie in that it is reacting to the cultural legacy of Rambo being this action hero since First Blood, but is also trying to maintain some of the tone of First Blood, and deeper and more serious issues than Rambo First Blood Part 2, as well as Rambo 3. I think that's probably the best you can do at this point, and I actually kind of like the combination. I'm not sure you can go back to his roots. I'm not even sure rebooting it would really work at this point. So regardless, like I said, I think that's probably the way to do it, and like I said, the story is really good in this movie, like I kind of alluded to in my intro there, and it is back to a war-themed focus. I realize it's always been about wars, but kind of a superficial aspect of wars. This movie really shows the brutality of wars, really shows the mean and nasty aspects of human nature. And I really like that because, one, it makes Rambo seem, and again, I have to reference back to any kind of recent movies where the action movies, there's always this moral gray zone. Because there's this moral gray zone, the filmmaker, in this case Sylvester Stallone, is predicting this and is demonizing the enemies so it doesn't look like Rambo is just a mass murderer. That kind of action just doesn't fly nowadays, and while I may like it, it doesn't really strike a whole lot of other people. Again, I think this was the best possible choice to try and demonize the enemies in this war, even if it does seem a little stereotypical and one-sided. Like I said, I think that's just kind of an embodiment of the character. I'm not sure it could go much otherwise. Rambo doesn't have that many moral gray zones, in the sequels at least, of what he's grown to be. Now, like I said, the story moves along at a really good clip. It does have that long build-up period that Rambo First Blood and Rambo First Blood Part 2 had. It is more action-packed, though, I think, oddly enough, because it tends to inject a lot of different characters into the Rambo universe, whereas previous movies have focused almost solely on Rambo, with the exception of Rambo 3, which also had Colonel Troutman playing a larger role. There was a lot more interjection from the character Julie Benz plays in this. I can't recall her name. Oh, Sarah, yeah. As well as a group of mercenaries sent to rescue these missionaries from Burma. And, of course, again, Rambo gets entangled in this, has to go help them. So he does end up having this explosive final showdown that lasts about 20 minutes and is possibly one of the goriest and most action-packed showdowns this side of Crank High Voltage or Shoot 'em Up, while still maintaining some kind of realism. I do like it, though, how this movie, even though Rambo does kill a bazillion people, don't get me wrong, much like he does in all of the movies prior, or post-First Blood, it maintains still a sense of realism, I think. He kills a lot of people in this movie, but not unrealistically so. He also gets hurt during this movie, a few times in fact, and his age actually quite affects him. I think that's interesting to see in one of these kind of larger-than-life action heroes in particular. Even if usually they've done this before in some movies where we're not introduced to a character, but given his legacy, it's interesting to see this evolution. And that's one thing I think Rambo does really great. It really moves forward the character of Rambo, dealing with his romantic past, dealing with his moral past, and dealing with generally his ethical dilemmas. And I really like how this movie ends. I'm not going to spoil it. I think they could end the series there if the fifth one does happen. I'm not objecting to it. It could go places from there and still end up on a different ending, possibly even a better ending if it's what I'm imagining. But I think this is a great place to leave it. If there is no more, this is definitely a really, really good ending for the character. Speaking of characters, Sylvester Stallone not only directs this movie quite well, has ideas for this movie packed full of them, but I mean his characters I think actually are given a fair amount of depth. Rambo himself is portrayed really nicely. A lot of presence. He is less cheesy than he was in the two sequels and is more akin to his First Blood character, albeit much older and jaded from a cynical, modern perspective. But even still, the support characters, I think there's some really good acting going on here. I'm not sure that they're given enough to do. I was saying Julie Benz as Sarah was really great in here, and she is a really great actress, and she's great here, but she's not given much to do other than cower. As well, Matthew Marsden is one of the mercenaries' schoolboy, plays a prominent role, and he's really likable, much like I think Brendan Fraser is quite likable, even if he just chooses his movie by dartboard, it seems. But I think that's one of the main weakness of the movie. Though it does have these good characters, it doesn't really get a whole chance to do much about them because it needs to keep that tension and pacing up that the Rambo series is known for. Overall, though, I really don't have too many complaints. This movie did have a villain as well, which I appreciated, even if he was kind of bare and moving back to the Rambo First Blood Part 2 where you just hate him because he's a jackass. Although, in all fairness, Sylvester Stallone did try to demonize him in different ways as well, which I will not spoil. Getting on to the action, like I said, it's fast, it's quite realistic, but incredibly brutal. A lot of people will not be able to take this movie because it makes a lot of modern slasher movies look really tame by comparison. There is blood, there is guts, and there is lots of it. It almost revels in it. However, the violence does have a point in this movie, and it does lend itself to the thematic nature of what the movie is trying to get across. Much like the rest of the series, this movie is not anti-soldier; it is anti-war, or at least war from the government perspective. And this movie, focusing on the complete lack of any kind of government control and effectiveness, I think really plays out nicely because these mercenaries almost turn into a metaphor for some kind of globe-trotting justice system that almost, it implies, needs to be there. That this kind of character that Rambo is needs to exist. And particularly, the way this movie ends up, again, I won't spoil it, really does come to a head at the end and solidify his character as the good guy that we all know he is. Lastly, I do want to go over really quick the effects and the sound. The effects in this movie do need to be given note because they're fantastic, but also specifically the gore is really, really detailed. And I say again, this movie is a very gory movie, but it's done very well. Never was I absolutely revolted, but there was some definitely like, oh shit moments when people got killed. Lastly, the music in this movie is done well. I did want to mention the score in this. I think this is probably a better score than the previous movies. And by previous movies, I mean First Blood Part 2 as well as Rambo 3. And overall, I really enjoyed Rambo. A lot of people may not like the slow build-up. I think it works really well, though, for Rambo just being kind of this ticking time bomb. And after his long absence in cinema, I think that tension really works culturally. Even outside of the context, though, it does work because Sylvester Stallone still casts a really imposing figure, and he's definitely a really imposing character in our history, or in our cinema, and in our psyche. So, should you go see Rambo? Yes. Rambo is a fantastic conclusion to the Rambo series and a great way to end off my Rambo-thon. It may not be the best action movie ever created, but as far as the Rambo series goes, it is definitely one of the better ones. And, since the Rambo series is one of the better action series ever created itself, it definitely places it in the higher echelon of movies. If you haven't checked out the Rambo movies, go ahead. They're great movies. You can find them for super cheap, or you can use less legitimate means and find them online. Either way, go check them out. You may be a little hesitant like I was at first, but trust me, they're well worth the investment. If you like action movies, if you like Sylvester Stallone, even if you're just looking for a movie to watch to kill some time, go check out the Rambo series, and particularly go check them out in order, I think. You can watch the fourth one first, as I did, but I do think it would have more impact. Besides, you don't really lose anything. First Blood's an amazing movie. Again, guys, tell me what you think. Post some comments below. Thanks for listening.